So we see a lot of throat problems, a lot of voice problems. I also see a lot of nasal, sinus problems, ear issues, lumps and bumps, the whole kind of gamut of kind of anything that you could imagine an ENT doing. And Nicole, I've known this entire time pretty much, maybe 8 years or so, since she started working with us. And she's been doing ENT actually longer than I have. I'll let her
21
talk.
years.
Yeah.
21 years in ENT, but general ENT, you know, I just like singers.
You were like to them.
But thanks.
That's so cool.
Expert, right?
Yeah.
So
So I went to music school in piano performance, actually, and music therapy, but have a minor in voice. And so I sing with the ASO chorus, like some of you. So that's how I get my classical music on, you know, in the group setting. But yeah, so we get a lot of singers and have voice troubles at all times, it seems, because we're all doing too much.
that's right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try not to bore you. If you see something that's kind of interesting, or that you have a question about, or that maybe is contradictory, please raise your hand, and we will make note. No, we'll answer as we go. The first thing I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit. This will get hammered home if you see anybody doing medical laryngology or voice talk in the medical world. We love looking at the layers of the vocal of the larynx and of the vocal cord mucosa. This is sort of a cross section, or actually a longitudinal up and down section through the windpipe and the voice box, right through where we speak. There's a whole bunch of details on there that probably aren't too important, but the two dark sort of triangular things are your vocal cords in the middle of the page there. And the space in between is where the air passes from down below the page where the lungs are to up above the page where the throat and the mouth would be. When we are taking a deep breath in, those vocal cords, some of the muscles relax, other muscles contract, and anyway, the vocal cords open up real big so that we can breathe in nicely. When we hold our breath or strain or maybe even about to cough, we actually snap those vocal cords shut and they come together so no air passes through. And then the magic happens sort of in between when when we want to either make a nice note or actually just make some speech. And those vocal cords come together in a split second, super, super fast. And they only allow about a millimeter wide ribbon of air to pass through them, and the surface of those vocal cords goes through a very fast vibration, allowing us to make a nice note. What's really important about that, there's kind of two layers that are super important to how good of a vibration and how good of a note we can make. Some people, unlike myself, are gifted in that they can make a nice symmetric vibration and make notes and harmonies and all of that. And other people, like me, have little vocal cord dings and scratches and scrapes and can't really make good sound, right? So the surface.
We haven't heard it, so
Yeah.
give us a
We're
note.
not going to do it tonight.
Everyone's trainable.
No.
It's
That's what she said. So
It's absolutely true.
the surface of the vocal cords is the same kind of tissue that's like on the inside of your cheek, that wet slimy stuff. It's a really thin layer of tissue. It's pretty important, but it actually regenerates, so that's helpful. So it can regenerate. It can get a little bit of a scar or a little bit of a trauma, and you can actually get through that and it can come back. It also gets swollen sometimes when there's allergies and crud and all the other. So it's affected. What's super, super important, there's this little thin, dark layer there just below that slippery layer that we call rinky space, or this the superficial layer of the lamina propria. And that proteinaceous or protein-packed layer is kind of like a jelly. If you were to get a whole bunch of it and put it in your hand, it would jiggle sort of like grape jelly or Jell-O. And that's like the stuff that Magic Voice is made of. When we look on a video strobe like Eva and voice therapists, speech therapists do, we see that layer of that proteinaceous jelly really vibrate nicely. And the problem with that layer is that we don't really have a good natural replacement for it yet, or a good artificial replacement for it yet, and it doesn't regenerate. So that layer is really prone to damage that's permanent from either trauma, like having surgery, or screaming too much, or having a vocal cord hemorrhage, or other kinds of damage that can happen to the vocal cord, smoking, etc. It also can get a little bit more fluffy and a little more swollen with other kind of allergic type or temporary problems too. But that rinky edema, that rinky space is super, super important for our voice quality, and it's kind of the holy grail, trying to figure out how to replace that, replicate that, and touch that up in order to improve professional voices. So kind of wanted to just have a little background. I know that some other docs are going to be talking, and probably everybody's going to mention those things a little bit. I was the first
We
to
always
it.
like
right?
a review.
A preview, review.
We're the first one though, so yay!
So,
No pressure.
so we were kind of asked to talk just a smidge about what is kind of the ENT things that could affect the voice. Eva talked a lot about reflux a couple weeks ago, so I'm not going to beat that horse too much in the ground.
I already did.
Eva read so you must have read our handout, because everything she said was on our handout.
The rules for reflux.
So I didn't bring the reflex handout, because you've already got it. It's already locked in the vault.
And
up
we
there.
know we don't do any of those things. No caffeine, no nothing.
Sure.
So we
I
see,
have my Starbucks.
as I ate pizza and
Oh,
Diet
yeah.
Coke on the way here. Right,
Yeah.
right, that's right. And chocolate tonight. That's right.
And then laying down
So
and let it all just.
we all kind of know and probably get sometimes what I just like to call the crud. I'm gonna keep it light and simple, so I won't use too many big, huge, ugly words. But the crud, which is kind of everything from runny nose, blocked breathing, itchy, scratchy throat, that postnasal drip, clearing the throat, maybe a little bit of red, watery eyes, nasal drip, and that's right, all that stuff. So, what causes the crud, Nicole? What do you think? What are our kind of big things that we see people coming in with feeling junky?
Well, certainly allergies, as you mentioned. Non-allergic causes. There are people whose nose just makes more than the normal pint and a half of physiologic snot a day, and it can be postnasal or out the front.
She said pint and a half.
Yeah,
It's true.
It's true. We
So if you
make that.
tied somebody upside down and just let them drip in a bucket, it would be a pint and a half.
Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah.
Where does it go?
We usually swallow it, and we don't really notice it unless it gets very viscous, and that's another reason to have voice problems when it sticks to the cords, and we have that chronic throat clearing when it's.
We just swallow.
Yeah, we just swallow it on
Just
down.
swallow
It
it
has
down.
its purposes, but too much is not a good thing. So there's two kinds of rhinitises, or the angry nose, that we see. Viral illnesses,
Yeah.
certainly,
Yeah.
you know.
So we kind of like to say, well, if it's been going on like for a few weeks, and you haven't really got a fever, or you're not really hurting and sore and pain, this is probably some kind of a reaction to something in your environment. Allergies are a big reaction, obviously. That can be seasonal. Around here, we have the green spring, where like literally there's green clouds rolling over this landscape, and it's amazing. But those green clouds are full of pollen, both the green stuff you could see and millions times out of stuff you can't see, that stimulates the airways up in the nose and in the lower airways to make things more swollen, more blocked, more mucousy, producing like a reaction of drip and drainage, and probably a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of that mild kind of scratchy postnasal drip, like that mild scratchy stuff. When we see folks who everyone says sort of the sort of our patients out in public, they say, well, now it's going to my chest, and I like to say, what does that mean? What does it really mean if it's going to your chest? That's where the voice box comes in. It's probably not actually gone to the actual lungs in the chest. It's probably just causing some swelling in the voice box at the vocal cords. Maybe this tissue right below the vocal cords that's really sensitive, making you feel like you need to clear your throat or cough, or giving you kind of an ugly barky cough, or a phlegmy, when you breathe in real deep and you hear a rattle, that phlegmy rattle. That's some thick mucus sitting on the vocal cords or sitting right in that airway that's just rattling and shaking around. So that's kind of what going to the chest sort of really means. It probably doesn't mean you're catching pneumonia. In extreme cases, of course, people catch pneumonia, and it gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
When
Doesn't mean you have bronchitis either. That's another one we hear
that's
a
right.
lot. When people mean they're coughing from here, or this sounds weird, it's not really your larger airway, which is a bronchitis, which can affect your voice. But
Sure.
anyway, it's just good to know the anatomy and think that it can get just as inflamed as the lower airway.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mentioned here it's a little tricky. So if someone's been kind of sick for 5 or 6 days, we don't exactly know what's causing that, probably, unless something just real obvious or clear. If you just have the crud for 5 or 6 days, it could be something blooming, allergy-wise. You could have caught a virus from, a coworker, a student, a young person, a child, a grandchild. So we tend to see people who are sick early in life, like 2 to 7, when they're like going into daycare in elementary school. They're sick all the time. And then later on, we actually see those people's parents, so the ones that are 25 to 35, that are now suddenly like, oh, I was doing great, I was healthy forever, and then now I'm like sick all the time. What's going on? My wife missed like 20 days of work last year because of my kids making her sick all the time. So that's the kind of stuff that we can see. So when we have that sort of sickness for a few days, we're usually treating that with over-the-counter medicines to sort of treat the symptoms of the sickness. I will spare you, but I wrote out all the list of all the over-the-counter stuff and what all the heck it was, and I didn't put it on here because it was just too long. It was ridiculous. So then I say, well, forget it. What is actually, if you look and say, what are the things I go to, and maybe Nicole can add, because she didn't have a chance to add to this fine
Well, it was so
encyclopedic
complete.
thing here. But when I actually look in my cabinet, what do I go to when I have like the crud? So I like Mucinex D. Mucinex D. I'm going to use brand names, but there's generics for everything we're talking about. Mucinex D helps a lot with that nasal congestion, that thick phlegm that you can get, some of the deep, ugly, hacky cough that you can get. It's great. The only problem is if you use it at night, you might not sleep well because it's kind of a stimulant. So there's like non or less stimulating versions of Mucinex D we can pull up and look up
How
too.
drying is the D?
The D is not too drying, so it's a little bit, well, I'm not the voice expert here, Nicole is.
I understand your concerns. A lot of
So-
these are,
Because
you
we're
know,
always like concerned
vocal
about anything with
hygiene.
the D, we're like, oh, how drying is that?
it's more of a decongestant, so it's more for the facial
It's
pressure.
not like the Claritin
It's
D.
less for the
Yeah.
facial pressure. The
Yeah.
Claritin, the Zyrtec, and the Allegra are and other things like Benadryl or other antihistamines. The antihistamine class is super drying. They're like made to dry. So that's really where you get more of the dry. The D is not as drying. It's not really all that. And Mucinex is not drying at all. You might actually find, if I'm really snotty and I take Mucinex, I'll start getting like watery,
Yeah.
phlegmy. It'll get watery.
Drain more.
Because Mucinex, just the
We're
chemistry
just
of it.
taught to be wary of all the
Yeah.
D.
That's right.
But not the Mucinex, that's okay.
Not the Mucinex. Well, yeah, I think
It's
the
a
D's.
different drug.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, it's a different drug. I like ibuprofen for headaches. A couple days of headache is totally fine to treat with ibuprofen. If your headache's going on a long time, of course, we need to seek care and all that. Or if it's super severe, we need to seek care. But ibuprofen helps not only headache, it helps all that body ache stuff you can get with a bad allergic reaction, and with a viral or a bacterial infection. You kind of get this sort of general feeling like you just feel crummy, crappy, bad mood. Your joints might hurt, your muscles might be a little sore. Ibuprofen helps a lot with that.
That's true.
Do you do anything else for them?
Well, as a singer, hydration, believe it or not. I mean, you forget about it, and a lot of these medicines will make you feel more thirsty. It may not be drying you out, it's just sort of how they work. Like Mucinex kind of takes your own moisture, adds it to your snot, helps you get it out, more productive. So really with all of this, you do need to remember, even if you don't feel like it, hydration and remembering the things that are actually hydrating, that, water, not Coke, even iced tea, they're all diuretics. Lemonade, they may taste good, feel good, but they basically just pull all the sugar and water with you, and just, you're gonna be thirstier when you have those things. But a lot of these medicines, pardon me?
And the Flonase and the Afrin.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
how do you like
those
Afrin?
are
What do you
great.
think about Afrin?
We're always worried about like the habit
The addiction.
forming
Mhm.
Afrin.
So, Flonase is a nasal spray that's an anti-inflammatory for the nose. It's if you're getting like an acute cold or kind of the crud for a few days, it's okay to use. It's not super effective for several days, but it does give you some improvement. It's great for allergies, but for that even acute exacerbation thing, it helps.
And there's a technique to it, right?
There is. You want to talk nasal?
No.
Let's talk. And then Afrin. So I put Afrin on here. It's really addictive if you use it all the time. It's been over the counter forever. What it does though is you can get like a rebound effect when it wears off, and it can get worse. That happens after you use it for about a week straight, or maybe 5-6 days straight. You start getting a rebound. So don't use it that long. But if you're really blocked up and miserable with head pressure and congestion and all that, Afrin can help for like 1, 2, 3 days. I don't think there's anything wrong with it for a couple days. How do you like to use nasal sprays?
You mean steroidal ones or just any of
How do
them?
you applying them to your nose? I guess any of them.
Oh, well, the televisions and ad campaigns are all ridiculous because they have you kind of, doing this, aiming it centrally. You don't want to do that. We usually tell patients to crisscross their hands because of the nasal septum.
Yeah, so like
yeah.
if you're gonna, basically you want that nozzle to not go towards the middle of your nose.
Mhm.
It can cause more nosebleeds and irritation. You kind of want it to go, obviously it's gotta go in the nostril hole, but then you sort of want it to cock it outward, more towards your eyeball on the inside. That's where all the like really important stuff is.
Until I heard someone look
The other
down,
thing-
point out.
Yeah.
The other thing everybody does is they sniff in, they do a nasal spray, they sniff.
Yeah.
I don't know. All that does is throw it into your throat a
Yeah.
little faster and affects the back of the
Just-
throat and
And
the
then
vocal
it's
cords.
like draining.
And then it
can
drains.
Can it
So
cause
actually-
some dysphonia, some hoarseness?
I think
with
so
it?
we know that topical steroids on the voice can, like with
Asthma inhalers.
asthma inhalers or
So
COPD
do not
inhalers.
sniff in while you spray.
I don't think you should. So it's like natural habit to sniff whenever something's in there, but I don't think you should. Anyway, yeah, long story, but try not to sniff. Just breathe through your mouth, just let it sit in there and don't sniff in, because you're kind of taking it away from the
See,
inside of your
there's a
nose.
technique to it.
See,
I've been
yes.
sniffing this whole time.
That's maybe it. That's maybe it.
So Afrin is addictive, but Flonase is
Flonase is not.
Different
That's
drug.
right.
Different
That's right.
drugs, yeah.
And Afrin's the brand name. There's about 15 different bottles that actually have the active ingredient Afrin in there. So I was trying to
I've
keep
used
Like,
Flonase,
keep
but-
this from being too
If
long.
you had an audition or something like that, so like in the short term, you
Yeah.
might see the nice opening with Afrin, whereas the Flonase won't kick in for say.
Flonase is not going to kick in for a
No.
few days.
So, for a
Afrin
short term.
get you
Yeah.
through. Get you
Save
through.
your
Interesting, good to know.
I
That's
know,
right.
exactly.
And it can help if your ears getting clogged up as part of your cold. So the Afrin's a quick way to open that eustachian
That's
tube
right.
if you can't quite hear how you're resonating and sounding.
That's right. If
It'll
your
be-
sinus pressure is
yeah.
really bad, some Mucinex D, some Afrin, and ibuprofen. That'll
Okay.
These are the
So
tips and
Yeah.
tricks for singers in the South, when you wake up and you're like, oh my god.
Goody powder and a BC. No.
No.
That's different. That's different.
Trying to
talk.
avoid hemorrhages.
Different talk. Different talk. Okay. In the South, they
Yeah.
said in the South. The other thing, I see people probably every week who are there for like, trying to check out their allergies or get allergies evaluated, treated their miserable allergies, and they haven't really been doing sort of the more simple over-the-counter stuff regularly. So my go-to, so saline mist in the nose is super safe. Your body's made of saline. It's super safe, not harmful. Probably if you're going to the doctor with allergies, they're probably bad enough that you need something maybe more than just saline. So my kind of general advice is to check out Zyrtec and Flonase. If you're doing Zyrtec and Flonase on a daily basis and still having crud, congestion, allergy type symptoms, it's probably time to up the ante and see a allergy specialist, professional, ENT, whatever, to kind of get a little more info about that. Do you have any other OTC meds that you'd like to reach for?
Really don't. You want to talk about the alcohol, the
Yeah.
natural rinsing things?
So under some more complementary things, so we mentioned saline, which is not really alternative medicine. It's just salt water that's balanced to your body, and it's perfectly safe and fine to do as long as you use good, clean salt water if you're mixing it up yourself, and keeping the bottle nozzles and all that stuff clean. I put on here some other things that sort of might make sense. So I just actually started checking out xylitol myself. A few years ago it came out. Xylitol is an artificial sweetener. It's actually a little sweet when you spray it in your nose too. You can taste it and smell it and everything. An artificial sweetener, but it's got these anti-inflammatory properties. Nobody exactly knows why it's got anti-inflammatory properties, but it does seem to block some inflammation
Who was the
passageways.
first one to shoot the sweetener up the nose?
Yeah.
Good question.
I know like xylitol gum, but I've never.
Xylitol gum, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
All these
And it helps
crazy
with
kids
cavities
these
and
days.
stuff.
Yeah,
The
I
dentists
mean,
really like it
yeah.
for cavities.
Yeah.
Probably there's some evidence that like bacteria may actually absorb it like a sugar, try to metabolize it and eat it and grow, and then they die. Like it's like a Trojan horse for bacteria. So
That's pretty cool.
anyway, xylitol nasal, I tried some of that. It's pretty good. I'll say it's kind of refreshing. It's
So you're like
it's
the
a little
guinea
bit.
pig for some of these things?
Hey, I'm not recommending it unless I try it. The high dose vitamin C. So there's probably a little evidence that vitamin C is at least anti-inflammatory. It might not make your your pneumonia go away or fix really bad infection problems, but for instance, we do see it suppress allergy testing whenever people are taking high dose vitamin C before testing. So we stop all those medicines ahead of time. It's got some basically along the lines of xylitol, some kind of uncertain anti-inflammatory property. That's probably helpful when you start coming down with a little something. She mentioned alcohol. There's this cool solution that we use, was invented in 1800 something or other. That's basically menthol, eucalyptus, camphor. These are all these like aromatic, good smelling, minty kind of compounds. And basically they make you kind of clear up. They clear up your nose. If you inhale them in your lungs, like with a nebulizer, they actually help your lungs clear up a little bit. And I tried to research this and look this up, and we do know a little bit about it. These molecules actually stimulate some of the airway tissues to relax and to kind of reduce their sort of what we call inflammation level, and stop making as much mucus and secretion. So there's a solution called alcohol that we kind of like to use on people who have kind of vague, mild to moderate nasal issues and complaints. You can mist it, squirt it, spray it, however you'd like to do. So that's kind of a neat alternative medicine. And I put it as the last one of my favorites, capsaicin nasal spray. So capsaicin, anybody know what that is?
Yeah, that's the stuff that makes peppers hot.
Pepper
Yes,
extract,
I
spicy,
know. We
spicy.
had a little talk the other day.
Tried this too myself. It's spicy. So people who have like unrelenting nasal blockage and don't want to go the real Western medicine route. Also, if you have headaches, nasal sinus headaches, these nasal sprays with capsaicin. There's one called Sinus Plumber. another one called Sinus Buster. These are like have horseradish in there, red pepper extract, and capsaicin, pure capsaicin extract. And it stings, yeah, it's a little stingy, but it does open you up, like when you're eating spicy foods, like it kind of tends to open your nose up.
A couple singer friends that I know of have suggested Ponaris.
Yeah, so Ponaris is another old-fashioned remedy. It's an oily thing. I see that it does have some grapefruit seed extract in there, which is,
Antifungal.
I can't find a whole lot of data about it,
Yeah.
but purported antifungal
I've never tried it.
activities
I don't
and
know.
some
I just
Yeah.
know that-
oily, kind of a moisturizing thing. So the main place I've seen Ponaris helping are people who've had kind of a lot of sinus infections and too much sinus surgery over the years, and their nose remains actually too dry
Oh.
and open up. The Ponaris seems to help with moisturizing their nose and helping. Maybe it's also helping with some of the like bioform, like bacterial nesting and colonization.
They.
You can only order it like from this kind of obscure
They
Scandinavian
suggested
man
it
who
a lot
sells it.
when we were
Yeah.
going when I was in Reno, and it was very high mountains and
Dry.
also
Dry.
dry and
Yeah.
smoky coming in
Yeah.
too. So that's why they
Just
kept
Reno.
suggesting. Yeah,
Maybe
it
it
was
was.
a
Yeah.
Reno, and that's why they suggested.
What about the sinus rinses?
The sinus rinses. So that's mainly those are saline. So basically salt
So
water
all
in
the,
your nose.
The neti pots and all that kind of
That's
stuff.
right. So there's this neti pot that comes from some Eastern medicine sorts of practices that was just shaped like a little teapot. More practical because it's cheaper and easier to clean are the squeeze bottles. So there's several brands of just a plastic, dishwasher safe, easy to sterilize and clean squeeze bottle. I think it's probably totally fine to use those and rinse your nose out with them, but it's more like a high volume flush. It's not like just a little mist or a pump. And so a lot of people it's kind of waterboarding, right? I've always thought it's sort of like against the Geneva Convention. But no, a lot of people that do them like them, and it's probably fine.
I don't do it very often, but when I do, it's like
The danger, the one caveat, we actually have people probably almost one a year in the country dying from them because they're using tap water or unclean water in their bottle to rinse, and that you can actually get a little meningitis and die from it. If you're going to use it, use clean water, distilled water, with the little salt packs that the company will sell you to mix it up with, or you can look up a recipe, but distilled water, and clean the vessel really good. So those plastic bottles, they're made to be dishwasher safe. You can wash it, let it dry. You can even pop it in the microwave and zap the rest of the bacteria on there. So basically keeping it clean. And then some people, like I said, if you try it and don't like it, it's totally fine. Just go back to a mist. And what other fun stuff?
Did you have a question?
Well, in other
Oh,
words,
yeah.
what are your thoughts of, not so much trying to, this would solve the problems, but perhaps if you're then taking something that's drying you out, steaming?
Basically another way to get hydration in the
Yeah.
nose.
Yeah.
I like it. It's a little bit cumbersome to do because it takes minutes to do, but yeah, I think it's a good idea. It probably gets down to the vocal cords better than the nasal rinses do too.
Yeah.
And the lungs.
But those should not get down there because
That's right.
if you're normal, you'll cough really bad.
The capsaicin,
Yeah.
Oh.
Capsaicin, so
Don't get it.
purported as a treatment for chronic cough. Also, capsaicin, a capsaicin, like basically customized inhaler, pulmonary inhaler.
Oh,
That sounds
It did-
terrible.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's been tried. It's been tried for these, basically blocking these neural pathways. So capsaicin is used for joint pain and muscle pain and stuff because it's kind of messing with the nerves and making you not feel the pain the same way. Like if you get hit by a ball, what do? You like rub it, right?
Yeah.
Make it hurt in a different way. Okay. Good. So when to see a doctor or a professional? Obviously, if things are getting worse after several days and things are getting worse and worse, so docs, what we can do is we can treat infections. So if your nose and throat are getting worse and worse, you're starting to get more blockage, it's lasting more than about 7 to 10 days, or you're starting to get fever for a few days in a row, this is a sign that you don't just have a little virus or some allergies, but that there's some kind of bacterial infection, and medications are out there for you to help. I mentioned on here during flu season, you can actually, if you're like in the middle of a flu outbreak and you're having flu symptoms, it's probably pays to go or at least call the doctor early because they can put you on anti-flu medicine ahead of time and get the flu stamped out in you and your family and your kids who gave it to you. If you have basically this crud for like more than about 10 days or so, it's probably worth seeing somebody and getting it fixed. If you have more milder symptoms that are sort of, not severe, you're not like taking off work right away to go in, but it's there all the time, we can probably help with other advice for treating what's probably allergies going on. The free advice is do the Flonase and Zyrtec every day and kind of then call us and see how far you get with that. If you're hoarse, your voice is lost, raspy, or in particular very raspy for a couple of weeks or more, or if you have gland swelling in the neck, those are all reasons to come in and see a professional as well to make sure there's not something else. We, in the doctor world, we all have kind of horror stories of people who say they have allergies that are really not allergies at all, and they come in too late. So
To get it checked out.
Oh, sure.
all right, so the kinds of things we do, I guess we got about 30 seconds left before they kick us off and start with the spitballs. So we obviously do acute infection treatment. We also do things like scan your sinuses or your neck to look for other signs of sort of things that might be leading to you getting infection, or some infection that's sort of knocked down 90% but is due to come back pretty soon. We do allergy evaluations to look for allergies in the environment. We can set you up for other kind of scoping of the voice box and throat, or video strobe of the throat to look for other changes in those important layers of the membranes of the vocal cords. Ultimately, we have surgeries and allergy treatment and all kinds of fun stuff, or better chronic medical management with some other prescription meds that weren't covered. So,
That's pretty much it, yeah.
Thank you.
well, thank you guys.